Welcome to the September 10th, 2012 work session. Work sessions are a more informal setting to update the council on business items. No votes will be taken on work session items. Tonight there are 5 items on the agenda. Public comment is allowed that is germane to an agenda item. If you wish to speak, you are required to fill out a public comment card and turn it in to the city manager. Public comment cards will be allowed for a total of 10 minutes per agenda item and no more than 2 minutes per person. Public comment will be heard at the beginning of each item. Once the item is called, no other public cards will be accepted. And I'm going to ask, even though the city manager's here, I don't think we have any public comment. You didn't turn in a public comment card, did you, sir? Okay. So we will start with the discussion of the new pain management clinic licensing ordinance. Mr. Paul Fricke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sounds like it's on. Ladies and gentlemen, this is something that's been on, kind of on the burner for a little while. The concern was a regulation of, they call them pain management clinics, commonly referred to as pill mills. The state did adopt regulations most recently in July of 2011, which authorized the cities to adopt and to enforce and impose a licensing fee, we call it an occupational tax, so that the city can require an occupational tax certificate for these types of businesses. The city had been waiting for the state to develop a schedule, a database and a schedule of substances. It's taken a lot longer than anticipated. It was supposed to have been done last year, then again earlier this year. At this point in time, from our information, is no real expected date at the moment. It keeps getting pushed back. Nevertheless, in the meantime, the cities have been authorized to go ahead and regulate or tax these types of entities. And what we're presenting to you is an ordinance to do that. For the most part, it follows the existing certificate of occupancy, or excuse me, occupation tax certificates procedures that the city has. The few differences are what I want to highlight this evening. And probably the easiest way is looking at the page numbers of the draft that should be in your package. The first relevant, I think, distinction is on page 5, which spells out to what the definition of this type of entity that would be regulated or taxed. And the key being that it's looking at, in this first paragraph, a physician who's primarily engaged in the treatment of pain by prescribing or dispensing controlled substance medications, and here's the key, when the majority of patients seen are prescribed or dispensed controlled substance medications for the treatment of chronic non-malignant pain. In essence, if this is the bulk of your business in terms of the number of patients, then we're considering you to be in this line of business. That there are options where other jurisdictions have considered going by dollar value of what your business is. Different numbers. Majority is one more than 50%. That's what we've chosen. That's one area where you can consider, but we felt this was a reasonable means of going about it. Then just you'll note that there are 3 or 4 exclusions, and I don't think it's going to come. In essence, it's the licensed pharmacies and ones that are tied to hospitals or retail pharmacy of a hospital, also the Department of Corrections, or ones that are attached to nursing home, personal care home, hospice programs. And then the final exclusion is for someone who administers, and in other words, provides actual, if it's a shot, essentially, administers the shot itself. But they aren't providing the actual substance itself. That's one area. Pages 6 and 7, section 1839, is probably the key part of this ordinance, which is to collect information about these entities and make sure that they're when they register that they are complying with or that we know that they're out there and we know who is involved if there's any issues. And primarily Section K is the one that kind of distinguishes it from other occupations. I don't know if there's anything particularly earth-shattering to it. We're just trying to keep track of them and that we know who's involved out there, and it helps if there's any issues, we know who is operating out there and who to go after if there's any problems. Page 8, Section 1840 just gives us 45 days to review the information and make sure that all of the information, including the keys, the DEA numbers, which allow them the license to prescribe and manage these drugs. The occupational tax certificate, again, is renewed on a calendar year basis. It's non-transferable. Page 9, Section 1844, they have to report to us if they change location. I mean, they cannot change location without getting our approval, cannot change the name of the business itself.
Within the city?
Within the city, yes, if they want to continue the validity of the certificate. And then also any of the individuals that are working, the nurses, physicians, practitioners working there, if there's any changes there, they'll have to report that to us. So basically, it's best described as keeping track of what's going on at any individual businesses. That's principally what this does. Happy to answer any questions. I don't know if there's anything terribly. Okay.
Are they restricted to any specific zoning classification?
You know, I didn't look that up. I would imagine it would be a commercial type of entity. At some level, you know, a hospital would become an institutional use. I don't think these, for the most part, would be in that category. So whatever commercial.
And does this call out any qualifications of the personnel who actually dispense the drugs?
No, I don't believe it. It talks about administering, although it does exempt them from those that all that they're doing is administering. There's no regulations. So nurses and doctors, this would not be. I mean, this is technically it's an occupational tax on pain management clinics, providing the Schedule 2, 3, and 4 drugs, not necessarily the administration of those drugs. So it actually excludes them from that qualification.
So what authorizes them to dispense these drugs? The prescription of...
Well, they're also going to be regulated at the state level. And all of nurses, doctors, physicians, they are going to be regulated as to what they're authorized to do. And I apologize, I couldn't tell you exactly how that's structured, but this does not attempt to change any of that or adjust any of that aspect of it.
I guess the question too is, you know, this ordinance and the process to gather information and to be able to track the applicant or client or whatever you want, not client, but the business. But it would really boil down to if it's a legal operation, the state coming down.
We're not. In
we
practice, we're not regulating them.
We may catch some red flags when they're going through the process, but if a red flag doesn't pull and it is an illegal business, then
we can help them shut it down.
Shut it down, but go through the state.
Right.
You mentioned up here, and I think in Broward County, they started out with 4 and ended up with 66 or something like that. Is there any restriction on the number of businesses?
Zoning.
Our zoning ordinance, I'm pretty sure, does not set any limit on this particular type of business. There's going to be a space and availability of land for the use.
Restricted by distance, like we do with billboards, for example.
For pawn shops, do we
I'd
not
say
do pawn shops?
that's potential. I'd have to go back to see if there's anything specific to. I don't believe the state is regulated sufficiently enough to keep us from doing that. And that would be a zoning type of issue, which could be, we could look into that.
And isn't this whole thing to kind of do like we did with the pawn shops and the precious metal? It's kind of just so we know who they are. We've got a little bit more information on them. And while even with pawn shops, they may be regulated up the ladder, we can do what we can and make perhaps a little tighter with what we have. But we just know who they are, and it's not just a free for all. Come in, our doors are open for
Very similar.
business.
Good analogy.
Anybody else have any questions? Staff?
The only question I had was the actual Article 2, Chapter 12, penalties. What exactly is that? Do you know? I haven't looked at it. I just...
Gosh, it's been a while since we tied it. It's. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but it's in the kind of the standard set of ordinance violation type provisions that the city has set out.
And what is... Do we know what that is, anybody?
What section, what are you,
Section 1845, they're talking about the violation of the penalty order.
45, okay,
Page 9 of 10.
got
At the
it.
bottom of the paragraph, it says, violation of this ordinance shall be subject to those applicable penalties set forth in Article 2, Chapter 12 of the Code of the City of Milton, Georgia. Just curious what those were.
I bet they're really good.
I'm sure they are.
I don't
I
know.
just-
I'll find out before we leave tonight.
Okay.
I'll find out for you.
You
Pull it up
guys-
on Unicode for me.
Any comments from staff on any of this? Or
You know, if we have the ability to regulate it, it's the type of business that probably warrants a little bit additional regulation, just to make sure that it's not one of those that gets out of hand.
Now, just because
You know,
technically we're
one
not
of those things that-
regulating. We're
In the policing world, we've seen problems come down. I mean, we saw that where these pain management clinics would, especially the ones that were just pushing pills, we kind of saw this progression down 75 out of Tennessee, and then even across the top end. I seem to remember that it was starting to come across the top end in Cherokee County. We were trying to just make sure that as this movement moved, that it didn't move at a pace that was faster than we were moving, nor that we could control.
And if remember, it's one of those things where we saw it coming. We wanted to at least have enough regulation there that we were a little bit harder to get approved than somebody else to kind of hold back a little.
And again, do we know what the regulations are around Milton as well? I mean, how enforceable or how strict are they?
I can tell you I can tell you this is very similar to Cherokee's.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the model that we've been taking it from.
You know, typically when you get an ordinance like this, and I've read it, it's been a little bit of time since I've read it, but what you look for is an ordinance that a good law-abiding business who's going to do this type of pain management in the setting that they want to do it in, that this type of an ordinance allows them very easily to be a good business. But it makes being a not so desirable business have a little bit more hard of a time complying with the law.
Since we have put that requirement in for pawn shops and gold dealers, distance separation, do you think it'd have any merit to putting it in this ordinance? I think we'd be challenged.
Don't know that you'd be challenged. I mean, I think you'd be challenged on a downright prohibition, but I don't know that you'd be challenged on a distance requirement.
On the flip side, though, would that affect any legitimate healthcare
I was
businesses?
trying to say, do you have a medical district
Yes,
or?
if we had a medical office building, it could make it tough if we had two doctors that were
Right.
both be in the medical office
Or
building.
one across the street, or,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
Or if you had two of these types of businesses and they both wanted to be in the same spot, we might not technically object to that. I don't know. I could probably get on both sides of the fence.
To Karen's point, I would be more concerned that we might be hurting some legitimate medical facilities with the distance, but that's
But
my
don't you have to
opinion.
have the threshold of 50, more if it's for chronic pain than than regular.
For now, that is, in terms of just registering and requiring the occupational tax certificate, that is true. It's not just to anyone who prescribes any of these medicines, it's someone who uses
Over
50% of their patients, the majority.
Do we have this, any of this types of businesses in Milton
No.
now?
Lance?
How is it, I'm old. How does, I think we mentioned this before, we've talked about this before, was acupuncture. It's non-drug.
It
I
would
mean, a
not
lot of
be-
times acupuncture, when it's used, they consider that a pain management type
Right, the definition is based on substances.
drugs.
Right.
And
Because that's what the ill that is really looking at.
just out of curiosity, because I actually worked at a place one time that had a methadone clinic just down a few doors down.
In Virginia.
Wasn't for me. But, I mean, does it, yeah, it's a whole different kind of pain. Does it apply to something like that, or is that something that's allowed?
And I'm not familiar with how, if you're talking about, would a methadone clinic be covered? I don't know what they're prescribed. If they prescribe these types of drugs.
Well, they're prescribing methadone is what they're prescribing, which is, you know, a synthetic heroin, basically.
And, whether it's Schedule 2, 3, 4, or 5.
I'm sure it falls in the DEA list somewhere, I can tell you.
Yeah, I would think it'd be one of those,
It's a scheduled narcotic,
yeah.
And
probably one of the higher ones.
I would think so.
all right. I'm just trying to see if it's one of the exceptions, if it was large enough such that it was considered in
I mean, you
personal
know,
care hospice. No, I think
I think that's the main
if it-
target of this.
inpatient care.
That's the main target of this stuff.
Well, bottom line, I think, this ordinance, I think we all understand what this ordinance does. It's not going to totally stop this kind of business, but it certainly
Well, yeah,
give a
it's-
red flag when we approve one, or staff approve one. But, then the state would come in if it is an illegal pill mill. But I think the question, to Bill's point, do we want to put something in there that regulates distance between these type businesses? Because it sounds like it does separate it by, if it's 51%, they're just prescribing pills, but do we want to get into that detail, or do we want to just leave it as it is?
Well, I think we're talking about a higher level of risk out here with drugs than we are with pawn shops.
Well, but you don't want to, you also have some legitimate businesses that do this kind of thing. And like I said, if you had a medical office building, it could be pretty tough if you could only allow one, pain clinic to be allowed in the medical office building at the time. So, I mean, you don't want these to be your storefront,
Kathy, do you have any?
taking over the local
Thoughts
gas
on that?
station.
Well, there are certainly models where you can limit, like based on population, there are various ways that you can limit the number of these uses. You get into the issue that Councilwoman Thurman talks about, though, is if you've got an office building, so you could do it by population so that you could have so many, and it wouldn't matter geographically where they were. I mean, so there are ways of doing it so that you limit it, but not prohibit them from clustering, which I think is a concern. So other cities have dealt with this, as they've dealt with the pawn shops and the gold buying places, sort of the same way, and it's a model that's out there.
Is it all, I'm going to guess it's always our purview to come back if, we have, if you get applications for several, at this point, we haven't had any, but we could come back and add that if we needed to, if we saw that as a trend, maybe.
It's starting to become an issue. Yeah, we have not seen any at all. We're certainly willing to administer the extra requirements as needed for anyone to get an occupation.
Do we have a moratorium on these now, or didn't we?
I think it just expired.
We did.
That's where we're
It's
at.
in August.
Well, does anybody else have any thoughts on that? Do you want to try to limit the distance, or look into that more? Find another avenue that doesn't that, or just let it kind of look at it? Or
I wouldn't mind looking into it a little bit further, if there's a good way to do it.
My thoughts on I mean, anytime obviously you have to have a balance of regulations. I mean, anytime you regulate, you're going to have additional costs associated with that. And if we have too high a cost, and I think we said before with the pawn shops, they just won't come here. From that standpoint. But at the same time, if they are here, then prices can be high that are residents who may need it may not use it and have to travel further for it. So that's just the question in my mind. But I just want to see what we put forward, see what that entails.
I think we're kind of, there may be an interest in, I'm okay without having the distance for right now. I think it sounds like Councilman Thurman is, but there's also some interest in maybe looking at a way to regulate it, either distance-wise or population or whatever. So maybe leave that up to staff if you guys can give us some other parameters that, when this comes before us, that we could either decide to use or not.
So the first question that we need to answer is the question that Paul needs to answer for us is whether or not the state even gives us the authority to regulate that. Right. So if we need to figure that out first to make sure it's something we can do. If it is something we can do, then we can look and see if anybody has done, and then
the ways they've done it.
See the different ways that they've done it.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Paul. Good deal. You guys got that? All right.
Before you move on, we've got the answer to Matt's question on penalties.
Yeah.
It's a 10% penalty, one-time 10% penalty for each calendar year that they do not file,
Okay.
and a 1.5% interest per month.
Of taxes or of revenue?
It is of their of the amount that they owe for a business license.
Okay.
Okay. We'll move forward for the discussion about the results of our citizen survey. Mr. Chris Longer.
Yeah, we're good. And I think we're okay. Do you want the city attorney to stick around for item number 5, or if legal questions arise out of that, we can do it at a later date? I mean, we can.
That's a lot of time.
He's open either way.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're good.
Unless
As much as I'd love to have you here, I think we're good.
Very good.
Everybody okay?
We good with that?
All right.
In work session, I think we're good. Thanks, Paul. Couple of items, these next two, maybe sort of go hand in hand. Maybe not really, but to some degree, I think they do. This first one that we're going to talk about is the results of the 2012 citizen survey. We did a strategic plan that kind of puts us on the right course for the next 3 years, and one of the requirements of the strategic plan is that we measure ourselves against some type of performance. And the way that you can do that is by going out to your citizens and seeing what they think. And we did that 3 years ago. We did that in 2009 with a benchmark survey, and we did it again here in 2012 with the same survey. So we have some ability to compare 2009 to 2012 with some reliability, and it not just be that we're out hunting and pecking to find surveys that may or may not ask the same questions or provide you with any kind of a snapshot of movement between the 3 years. So with that having been said, we did this completion of the citizen survey is an action item for the 2012-2015 strategic plan, so we are fulfilling one of the requirements of the strategic plan by doing the survey. This gives us a tool to measure the citizen perception and citizen trust in city government. You'll be interested to see some of these findings here in a minute. It gave us an area of success and areas of improvement, kind of gives us a snapshot of that, and it, again, follows on the heels of the first citizen survey that was conducted in 2009. A little bit about the survey. This is the ICMA National Citizen Survey. It's a collaboration between the National Research Center and ICMA. It's neat because we are able to benchmark ourselves against other local governments across the nation. This is the one that ICMA endorses, and it's created again in a partnership with them. So it's.
So they ask the same questions.
We have what you'll see as we go through this, we have very little impact in the questions themselves, except we are allowed to ask a couple of open-ended or free-form questions at the end. But the fact that you can have some sense of reliability in the results is that the questions are the same questions, and they are free of the survey bias that you can sometimes write into questions if you want to, and make them turn out however you want them to turn out. Of this, we sent to 1,200 random households. Now, I said we sent, the survey company sent. We didn't have any influence in who was selected, how they were selected. And of that 1,200, 234 surveys were returned, a 20% response rate. And as a result of the 20% response rate, that gives us a margin of error in the survey of 6%. Okay. I also want to touch on, and I'll touch on again later, that we kind of did one additional step this year, and I was like, we're in for some abuse. Let's go ahead and try this extra add-on. And that was to be able to put the survey online on our website and let anybody who wanted to come take a survey come take it. Now, it didn't necessarily dump into the results that are reliable results that we can live with. It's pretty much put a survey up there and see who goes and takes it. My fear was that everybody who would take that survey or who would spend the time to go to it were those that were going to have something that they wanted to see different, or something that they wanted to tell us that we weren't doing a decent job. But I got to tell you on the front end, so you'll kind of be in the mindset as we go through this, that the online survey that we did very, very, very closely tracks the results of the one that is that is more reliable. So it was quite interesting to see that result, but very positive to see that result. Had some benchmarks. This is, again, the comparison data that we have from other cities that have taken the ICMA survey. Now, one of the only things I don't like about the survey, and I'll just go on the record saying one of the things I don't like about the survey, is that you're benchmarked about whoever else does the survey. So there are two ways to become better than the benchmark. And that is either to do something proactively that causes you to be better than the benchmark, or hope that cities do the survey that are worse at that topic than you are. And artificially, then, you can end up above the benchmark because there's other people doing it that are doing it worse than you are. And take that with a little bit of grain of salt when we deal with benchmarking. That's just one of the reality aspects of having a benchmark that we just have to be honest about, is that I'd like to think to the large degree we control our own destiny. There is that opportunity that some of our destiny was controlled for us. Of the benchmark jurisdictions, 33 are from the southern states. 33%, 46% have populations less than 40,000 people, just to kind of give you an idea. Let's get into some of the results. I had a copy printed out because it's, can you see that from where you are, Matt, or are you going to turn around that way? They get bigger as we go along, although I got to tell you, when we started with this survey, you would have obviously been in the conference room, and I said, ooh, that's not going to work. This one kind of gives us an idea of where we are on a national benchmark, and this was kind of we're going to start more or less with a punchline and then work into the details. If you want to get an idea of what people think of the quality of life is in Milton, if this is a place that your neighborhood is a place to live, Milton is a place to live, recommend living in Milton to someone who asks, and if they're going to remain in Milton for the next 5 years. The two that stood out and the two that I highlighted in green there are, it's always important that people feel as though the quality of life in Milton is good, and you can see there when you put the comparison against the benchmark is much above. And then you also want people that are talking well about the community, that if they're willing to recommend to a friend that Milton's a good community to come to, that's something that we key in on. None of those are bad results. You can see that they're definitely in the 75% and up as an average rating. At the very least, we're similar to the benchmark and the bottom one, which is people remaining here. I guess I could grasp that. I mean, you've got a fairly affluent, educated, probably to some degree transient corporate type population, and the fact that they would be subject to a transfer is probably not unlikely. The 2012 survey questions are similar to those that were asked in 2009. We did ask two custom questions in this survey. One was to determine the stakeholders so that we could report against the strategic plan. The second was to meet a requirement that the police department have as they pursue their accreditation through the CALEA organization. And you'll see what it was here in just a second. And then one open-ended question was added to the 2012 survey to allow citizens to provide their opinions about the single most important thing Milton can do to improve its services. That was open-ended, meaning we have individual word responses, not attributed to any person, but attributed to a person, that people had the ability to say what they wanted to see in Milton. And it's no doubt we could probably we could characterize the top two. If y'all were to guess, if you said traffic and parks, you probably guessed correctly. Now, as we move through these slides, what I want you to pay attention to, or at least not pay attention to, but to understand, is that there's 2 bars for every item. The 2009 bar is the bar underneath. The 2012 bar is the bar on top. And the percentage represents those people that responded that the question asked was either, that the answer was either good or excellent. There were 4 responses to the questions: good or excellent, fair or poor. So in saying, let's just take the second one down, the overall direction that Milton is taking. The way you would read this in a sentence is 68% of the people responding to this survey believe that the overall direction that Milton is taking is at least good. It would be good to excellent, but is at least good. The place also, as you go through this, that you can read between the 2 surveys is that anytime that gap is bigger than 8%, that's considered to be a statistically significant increase or decrease over the 3 years. And that's when you start to look at that first one where you have 38% in 2009, and you have more than an 8% increase to 59% of that are now rating it good to excellent to the value of services. That would be a statistically significant jump in results. You can see a big jump in overall direction, big jump in Milton government does at welcoming citizen involvement, job Milton government does at listening to its citizens, a jump, and then overall image or reputation, not as big a jump, but still at that 8% or greater. And you can see in public trust we ended up above or much above the benchmark.
We were actually pretty low on some of these back in 2009.
Yeah. Okay, stop me at any point as we're going through this if you have questions. I'm just going to continue to talk so you can kind of get a sense of what the results are. But this one I find is a very interesting slide, and this is people's perception or perspective of the level of services provided by their local government, the city of Milton being the top one, where in 2009, 68% felt it was good or excellent. In 2012, 83% feel it's good or excellent. The funny thing is that's a fairly significant increase, where then you get the level of service provided by the federal government, state government, and county government, which you could probably characterize in the last 3 years is flat and at a third of the level that would suggest, or a little bit less than a third, that would suggest that the services provided are at least good. Any questions there? Okay. Civic engagement, this you'll see some decreases. That first one is attend a meeting of local elected officials or other public meeting. You can see 35% of the respondents had in 2009, only 20% had in 2012. Less people are watching us on the internet, apparently. Less people have volunteered some time to spend in a group or an activity. Pretty flat and participated in a club or civic group in Milton, and pretty flat of provided help to a friend or neighbor. So what we can take here is we are a very friendly community that doesn't come to public meetings.
Because they're helping their neighbor.
That's right.
They can send emails.
Okay, economic sustainability. Employment opportunities, I would anticipate that to be below the 50% mark. I mean, that's just with the limited employment area that we have in Milton at this point, although even though we're limited, we're still better than we were in 2009. Our shopping opportunities are decent. Milton is a decent place to work, as you can see there, with 80% saying it's good to excellent. And the overall quality of businesses is high. You can see in all 4 of these categories we are above the comparison benchmark of other cities. Land use and zoning, the overall quality of development is high. You can see these are both much above, again, the benchmark. So the quality of development is high and the overall appearance of Milton is high. Which I don't think either of those are shocking. Parks and recreation. Now, if our city parks had rated anything other than much below the benchmark, I would have worried that they had surveyed Johns Creek. So that didn't come as a shock, although what you can see there is at least it's below the benchmark, but at least it is increasing, I guess, if there's something to look positively at this slide. is that we've gone from 55 to 67%. You can see that there are less people that maybe have participated in a recreation program, about the same amount visit a park, and people feel as though there are more recreational opportunities. But those numbers are still low. That's even though there's an increase, those numbers are still low, which I think we would have expected them to be. Okay, transportation, this is the other one that you go, wow, okay, so we don't have, car travel's not easy, bicycle travel's not easy, walking's not easy. I don't know that that's necessarily not easy to Milton, that's probably not easy to the region. But you can see that, again, what I look at in this slide is the reality of the world as it exists, and I know what that is, just drives that number to some degree. The good thing is that, again, even when you look at your performance over 3 years, the performing is, even when the numbers are low, the performance is still going in the right direction. Isn't it funny, though, that even our responses are much above the benchmark on a... Yeah, I know some of the stuff they give us credit for if we have to give it to other folks. Public safety, you can see 87%. Value of the police services as good or excellent, up from 83. Fire services 96, up from 95. 97 ambulance or emergency medical services, up from 90. I've got to think that that is also just a second response to what people perceive as those first responders coming to my house. Crime prevention up from 74 to 78. Fire prevention up as well. Traffic enforcement up. Municipal courts up. And emergency preparedness up. And again, all of the public safety above or much above the benchmark. Public schools and libraries, I included this one here to give credit where credit's due. Now, we obviously can't take credit for either one of these, but a lot of what these two organizations do, particularly the public schools, are what makes Milton so attractive of a place to be. You can see even the public schools are valued up from 86 to 95%, rating our public schools as good to excellent. That's tremendous. A library that we don't have got rated fairly well, and I've only got to think that that's just an access to the library and not necessarily ours. Wait till we get one. This lots of room for improvement. Information and awareness. This was the one that tears Jason up, and I told him not to be torn up about it, that there's less people that read the Milton newsletter, but still we've got 74% that are, and that have visited the Milton website, down from 71 to 62. I don't know that this doesn't necessarily correlate with the slide that we had that talks about the number of people that are actually participating either in a meeting or viewing us on the web. You know, that seems to be a pretty consistent parallel. You probably could draw a parallel relationship there to some degree and say that in 2012 we just have less interaction. That could be because the new has started to wear off, and we want to watch that. We want to make sure that the new doesn't wear off too far, that all of a sudden that the city's forgotten. So, you know, these are things that we don't want to lose sight of the fact that they're occurring, but I also don't know that that drop is one that's ready to throw the red flag yet. Okay. Environmental sustainability, cleanliness of Milton at 92%, excellent to good. The overall quality of the natural environment in Milton is up. Preservation of natural areas such as open space is up, and air quality is up. All of these, environmental sustainability, either above or much above the benchmark. Community inclusiveness, sense of community up. Openness and acceptance of the community towards people of diverse backgrounds is up. Available of affordable quality child care. That one took a really statistically significant jump from 49 to 80%. I don't know that doesn't necessarily speak to some of the demographic of the respondents in this particular thing. I mean, you have to, as I recall the number, 51% of the respondents had, 5149 to have children versus didn't, under or over the age of 17 in the house. So. Milton is a place to raise a child. Obviously, 92% feel it's good or excellent. And as a place to retire, I think we probably expect that too. 64%. That number, I expect that number to be lower than a place to raise a child, but partly because we're still developing some senior-type services. But again, against the national benchmark, we're still similar. Available of quality health care, affordable quality health care, availability of affordable quality food, and availability of preventative health services are the way those three read. You can see those are all up over 2009 and above, much above the comparison. I promise we're getting towards the end here, folks. How they rated City of Milton employees on knowledge, responsiveness, courtesy, and overall impression. Similar to the benchmark, 2009 to 2012, very similar results. None of those rise to the 8% that they're really, we're talking, I'd call that flat over 2009. Okay. Custom questions. The first question was, please indicate to the extent to which, if at all, you are personally interested in the following topics in Milton. And this was so that we could get some sense of our response to the strategic plan, of who was represented here as families and youth, who was represented as the business community, and who would be interested in issues affecting the equestrian community. You can see the range there that the bulk of our folks are very interested or somewhat interested in things that affect family and youth in the business community. Not terribly interested in issues affecting the equestrian community. The second custom question was the one that we used to allow the police department to comply with their accreditation process, and that was, please rate the quality of each of the following aspects of Milton police officers. Number one, overall competence, with 85% saying good to excellent, officer attitude and behavior, 77% good to excellent, and those, I guess, were the only two questions that was answered there, asked there. And then we asked this open-ended question, and it was, what is the single most important thing the City of Milton can do in the next 5 years to improve one or more of its services? And as you can see there, leading the top is road and sidewalk maintenance, transportation, parks, and rec. Number one, number two, I don't think that would fall as a shock to us. Government taxes, things that followed in the don't raise taxes idea came in third. Growth in commercial residential development, safety and police, and then economic development. Kind of rounded it out, but clear two winners there. This next slide is the one that really kind of tells the picture, and it really is the most visual slide of any of, wow, our color is really horrible. Holy cow. Look over here, folks, because that one looks yellow. There's three colors on this screen. There's red, there's yellow, and there's green. I think over here you can see it easier than you can see it over here. Green are areas where we're above the benchmark. Yellow is where we're similar to the benchmark. Red is where we are below the benchmark. The other thing you can look at there is arrows. There's arrows that point up in 2012 or arrows that would have pointed down, and those would have indicated what the trends would have been since 2009 in that particular category. So that's a snapshot, kind of a visual color snapshot of what it looks like 2009 to 2012. And you can see where we were in line with the benchmarks and below the benchmarks in some cases in 2009. You can see that in 2012 that has changed a good bit to being above the benchmark, but in all circumstances, even where we are below the benchmark as indicated in city parks, you can see the trend is still what I would consider to be the right direction. So that's kind of the one slide that really tells the story and lets you kind of look at it in a visual 2009 to 2012.
What is the key? I can't see.
The key is a key performance driver. Now, there is a way that they identify what becomes a key performance driver, and it's a whole bunch of formulas and stuff. My question was, how in the world is power utility our key performance driver for us? We don't have one. So, but it was a correlation of something to something else to something else. And long story short is what was driven from that is that having power and ease of connection to power, it was basically it's available and people valued its ability to be available with ease. So I don't pay a lot of attention to those key drivers because we know the real, we know the reality of it is that that's not something that we have. I'm more interested in the perception and reality of how we are doing and how people feel as though we are doing on more of the performance questions. And with that, does anybody have any questions? This book is available, and I'll be happy to. We have a couple of them. If you'd like to take a book home and look at the survey and all its nitty-gritty details, you're welcome to do that. I just ask. I'd rather not print out a whole bunch of them. If you take it for a week, go through it, then bring it back, and I'll give it out to the next person, whoever might want to take it home and have a look at it. It's quite comprehensive and quite thorough, and it's all here.
I'd just like to make a comment, and sure, hopefully all of us are feeling good about those results, and proud, and along with our staff, and we appreciate that's a great team effort to improve in all those areas. So I don't think we could ask for any better. So thank you guys for everything you do.
Absolutely.
And thank you guys for the decisions you've made that leading us that way. So.
Does this firm feel that 1,200 was a good representative sample? And the response was
Yes, and because I asked that question too, because we were starting to see that there were some surveys that were returned, and there, when you get returned to sender, it's the city's address that's in the corner of the envelope, even though it doesn't come from the city, but it makes it look like it comes from the city. And before the people get the survey, they get a letter from the mayor saying you're about to get the survey. Yes, we had that. Christine had that conversation with them, and then she had it with me. Yes, they're comfortable that is a representative sample that gives us, and it gives you the reliability plus or minus 6%. I mean, remember, the more people that would respond, either the more people you survey or the more people you respond, you drive that margin of error down. So that's the control number. And 6%, that's a 12% swing. I wouldn't call that to be a margin of error that I'd take to the bank and wager $10,000 on. But I think it's reasonable considering what it is, and it reasonably can compare us to about the same thing last year. So it's a percentage that we can take with those qualifiers.
Is there a way they could test that sample to make sure that it hit a wide spectrum of the demographics?
Yeah, and there's a map in here that shows the fact that it did do the wide spectrum. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to put my hands on it right off the top of the bat, but
And is that map based on who was sent to, or based on who responded?
based on who was sent to.
What percent did we get in response?
20%.
Pretty high. What's the normal? What, about 3% or something?
It's probably bigger than that, but 20% is actually a fairly decent response to a survey.
That's fine.
There is a map in here somewhere where it shows Milton, and it puts a little dot on every address that it sent it to. And you can see that it looks reasonably representative. That's what I looked at, is does it look reasonably representative of how the population is dispersed? So that we had more sent down here in the Highway 9 area than we did out on Hickory Flat Road, and that's because you have to survey more down where the population is to be able to get a decent cross section. I'll find that map while Jason's talking.
The results of the online, for people just filled it out online at the city website, was very similar.
Very similar. It was shockingly similar. 149 people responded to that. And I think it was 149, but it was shockingly similar. I wouldn't, and I didn't anticipate it to be. I even went out there and said, "Gosh, there's no way this is going to be anywhere close to this one," because typically what you see, and even with the project that I just did with the city of Fort Lauderdale, we start to deal with citizen engagement. What you find is that when people find a reason that they have to result to engage to some degree, it's because there's something that they need fixed, or because it's something that we're not doing right.
It's just like the online surveys for any of these travel things. The people who make the comments and reviews are typically those that are unhappy, not those that are
right.
That are happy.
Yeah.
So was that 149 part of the 20%?
No.
That was
No,
in addition.
it was just one of those things that we said, let's add this feature on this year. Because we do try to drive people to our website, so it was one of those things where people always want an opportunity to weigh in, that when we announced the citizen survey was going out, we have people every year that call and say, please send me one, I'd like to participate. So even though we couldn't do that in the form of having it be a part of the actual results, we wanted to open up an opportunity this year that everybody could be heard. Even if they weren't selected randomly, they could still go complete the exact same survey. It wasn't a web-based survey that was different. It was the exact same survey. It just didn't get tallied as a part of these results.
It's a good check.
Yeah.
Okay?
Thank you, Chris.
Hang on, give me 1 second here. I have got, oh, that's lovely. Okay. All righty, on to the
Play ball.
next one. Do what?
Play ball.
Play ball. On to the next one. And I'm going to start this one just because Jason's going to make a great presentation, but I want to tell you why Jason's even getting here making this presentation.
Probably to get some more attention because the website travels down.
Can I say something about that?
No, you
Fill out
can't.
a public comment card.
Leave it. Don't take this awesome presentation and start it with that website thing. We had in the retreat, I kept hearing, and even in the budget, we put some money, and everybody said, let's do a branding thing. Let's brand Milton. We need to brand Milton. We need to figure out what Milton's brand is. What's the logo like? Do we need a different logo? Is the logo representative of what we really are as Milton, or was the logo a clip art logo that we started with because we needed a letterhead? I think it's the latter rather than the former. And one of the things that I had Taylor Gillig do this summer while he was here, you all remember Taylor, was about in proximity to when we were having the retreat. And one of the things I asked Taylor to do was to go through and do an analysis and a kind of a research project for me and tell me what the different options are with respect to branding, rebranding, with logo development, with other cities that have done these things. Go out and just kind of give me an idea of what it is, what it's going to cost, what the different options are, so that then I can take it back to the council and I can say, guys, we've got 1 of 5 different options. I might suggest we choose this one because of these different factors. And Taylor did that. Taylor did that study for me, and that's going to be the first part of the presentation that Jason makes. One of the things then Jason said after he was doing this is he said, well, can I just take a shot at this? Can I just take a shot at putting some stuff together? And I said, well, absolutely. I mean, there's no reason if we have the talent in-house to be successful doing what I think you all might want us to do, let's take that. Let's take a stab at it first before we decide we need to go hire a consultant to do something else. So we want to be very clear up front that we are not coming here tonight with your new logo and telling you that we think that this is what you need. We're going to come tonight with some ideas and a kind of a course of how we got here, and then we're going to throw some pictures up that Jason has come up with. I got to say, I'm kind of impressed with them. We'll see what you think. I'm just looking at how you react to it. And if all of a sudden you go, Chris, that is wrong direction, then we'll know that we got to take a different course. But if you all of a sudden say, that might be what we were thinking about, and with a little bit of tweak, a little bit of work, we might get there. I think we have the talent in-house to do a lot of what other folks are going out of the house to get done. And you might see some of that in some case studies as Jason works through this. So without further ado, I wanted to set Jason up so that you all know that he didn't just decide one day he wanted to do this. There was some serious thought behind how we got to this and why we are trying it before we go a different route. Take it away, Jason.
Okay. I have some, so you guys can follow along, and then also so you can get a better view of some of the logos and everything that I'm going to present.
Oh, I sure do.
So as the city manager said, I'm just going to give a presentation tonight, kind of an overview of branding study and then the work that I've done. So first off, we have the central question of what is Milton's brand? Does it exist already? And if it does, can we refine or capitalize on it? If it does not exist, can we implement a new one? So first off, what is a branding study? A brand is simply the city's reputation. It's what people say about it. It's going to incorporate a lot of aspects of the government, including our current situation, and it's really going to be a collaborative process. It's more than just a logo and a slogan, too. It's something that is driven by our strategic plan. So then, what would this kind of study entail? It includes a lot of components. We have to know our audience. We have to know what they think about us. We need insights and research that's both relevant and emotionally charged for it to matter to people once it's created. Of course, the logo and brand design, and then, of course, implementation and evaluation of the study, because if we're going to spend a good amount of money on a study, we obviously want to prove that it worked when we're done, that it was a good investment. So what are the costs? These are the numbers that Taylor had run for the city manager's office. You're going to see some of these companies in here that are kind of the best at what they do as far as municipal branding and things like that. Destination Development International, $67,500 from Mount Vernon, Illinois. North Star Marketing, $164,000. That's $50,000 for the plan and $114,000 for the implementation. Mesquite, Texas was about $64,000 for logo design. However, they also hired another company for $230,000 to improve the city's image. McKinney, Texas, $242,750. The logo development alone was $62,000. Plano, Texas, which keep that in mind, because apparently they're pretty popular, that's $42,000. We got some more. Let's keep coming. We got Carrollton, Texas for $238,000. And if you do it in-house, some of the costs were right along that amount, $241,000. And just for a market study would be $25,000. Now that doesn't even get you a logo or anything. That's just a pure market study. So a rough estimate would be $45,000 to $100,000. Then of course you've got the additional cost to implement the developed plan, and that's got that's a whole other line item. But it's not just money. That sheer costs creates an expectation in the community. When you spend $230,000 on something, your citizens are going to come and they're going to go, what did you just spend $238,000 on? It better be pretty great. And we're talking about art. We're talking about ideas, feelings. That's really subjective. And asking people to describe home can be a very difficult exercise because you're dealing with a lot of strong emotions. And you're dealing with a lot of subjective responses that provide completely contradictory information, because what is home for one person is not what's home for another person. And you're going to have detractors to virtually all your findings. In November 2010, a Metro City spent $105,000 on a branding and a logo. In July 2012, the city sign project was scrapped indefinitely after another $40,000 had been spent. That's $145,000 for a project that people really weren't that excited about. As you can see, they paid $100,000. You take Walmart, you add Plano, Texas's tagline, and you end up with what you see there. So, does a Milton brand exist? Do we already have a brand? Do we need somebody to come in and tell us what our brand is? We already know. When you mention Milton, a lot of people say, well, that's where those horse farms are, right? Horse farms. That's all anybody ever says to me when I say I work at Milton. That's where those horse farms are. So then we look at our vision statement. We say we're a distinctive community. We embrace small town life and heritage. We preserve and enhance our rural character. And we've been noticed for our quality of life. We are recognized as having the highest quality of life in the state of Georgia, 9th highest quality in the southern United States by the On Number survey. That's the Business Journal. Now, why did we get that? It's because we have strong economic basis, impressive housing stocks, and effective educational systems. So anything that we need to produce needs to say, okay, you've made it, you live in a very beautiful place, and your kids go to great schools. And of course, we also have 5 years of history. So if we try and implement something now, maybe change course or redefine who we are, it could be disastrous, as you saw with the other city. That was not a very popular use of the money. So when we looked at a branding study, you know, I would argue that we've already done a lot of the hard work of a branding study. We know who our audience is. There are stakeholders for our strategic plan. It's families, it's the business community, it's the equestrian community. We already have that honest assessment of the city's situation. We did SWOT exercises, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And we did city comparison research. And we have insights and research because we held stakeholder focus groups before we were doing the plan. Then we had feedback and input sessions about the plan. Now, I understand this wasn't exactly about, well, what do you think of this logo or that or this? But people were there to tell us what they think about the city of Milton, how they think we're doing, and what they think we should be doing. I would also argue that the National Citizen Survey gives a pretty good idea of what people think about us as well. The overall image and reputation of Milton is 86% believe good to excellent. That's up from 78% in 2009. The overall direction, 68% good to excellent, up from 50% in 2009. We've been producing this stuff and building this brand over the last 2.5, 3 years. You can see it right here. What we've got is rural, families. The font choices indicate high class, being learned, old-fashioned, what our residents have essentially said that they like. So can we refine what exists? What we've got here is the horse symbol and Arial font. So horses, I would vote keep the horse. Say we got to keep the horse. It's a symbol of vitality, strength, grace, and peace. It's indicative of class, wealth, and history, but it's also common sense. You have horse sense. It's also a connection to the earth. Suggests movement and natural complexity, trust and work ethic. And we're predisposed to see them as symbols because of their long connection to cars and sports, art and literature. And I have a nice little quote from Shakespeare there. I would also say the font, the Arial font, I would not keep. I would like to go with a Trajan. In designing Trajan, the designer was influenced by the styles of the chiseled writing of the Romans during the 1st century. It's all capitals, which indicates authority and stability. It's also a neoclassical font, so it's used to suggest American history, governmental excellence, West Wing there, legal expertise. It's pretty much the go-to font on any legal thriller you're ever going to find, and historical significance. You're probably used to seeing it because it's used in movies constantly because it gives an air of, you know, epicness or significance to films. And plus, everything looks important in this font. So what I did was knowing that, so I wanted, in producing a logo, I wanted something that was classic and instantly recognizable. I wanted it to be informed by the community aesthetic. By that, I mean, I wanted it to look like it fit with what we've already got. Where do we have symbols and fonts all over the city of Milton that are advertisements for the style of life in that area and its neighborhoods? I wanted whatever we had to look like it could fit on a neighborhood because that's what we've got. That's why people want to come and live here. That's a little advertisement to people. Think of the quality of life you could have if you lived here. I wanted it to be different from surrounding cities. I wanted it to incorporate what makes us special or different. And I wanted it to give a sense of history and small town feel, movement, trust, experience, and then of course professionalism, without being explicitly modern or corporate. These were the first couple that I came up with. You'll notice what I did is I took the city seal, I included Latin. What that is that's integrity, heritage, and value. And I experimented with some filigree, and I kept the Trajan font there. When we took these to staff to see what everybody thought of them, a lot of people did not like the Latin. They thought it was trying too hard. They also thought the logos looked way too close to the University of Georgia's logo, which I wasn't really planning on, but I guess, you know, it filters in your brain after a few years ago in there. The filigree was also not very popular. About me and Chris were the only ones who really liked it. And they, there is a real pragmatic problem with the city seal. It's difficult to reproduce in all mediums, T-shirts, print, all sorts of different things. And we wanted to establish that, we wanted to shorten that, establish December 1st, 2006. So I have some other ones. This one is a horse and a rider, and this is actually, if you know anything about film history or photographic studies, this is a Muybridge horse from the English inventor Edward Muybridge, who basically invented how we have movies that go at 32 frames a second. Once again, you see the horse with the rider, filigree, same type font. Staff with these, though, they felt that the horse with the rider was too Kentucky, wasn't necessarily enough Milton. And they, there was some thought that the horse appeared to be toppling over, so it needed to be more substantial. They did like the main visual element that popped out of the logo. And again, the filigree was not very popular. So back to the drawing board. So I know I needed a larger horse with no rider, and I know it needed to be easy to reproduce and recognizable. Didn't need to have any Latin anywhere near it, and it should include that quality of life tagline, since that's a big honor that we should be pushing. So I came up, I found another horse. Added the tagger, added a little bit of color pop in there. This is similar. Then I had this one with the silhouette on top. And this one with the silhouette on top proved to be the most popular of staff. They really seemed to like it, for one thing. Here it is with a little bit of color pop to kind of get across, Milton, best quality of life in Georgia. Those two things are thematically linked. The horse is not centered because I wanted it to be moving as you read this way. The horse moves with you. That also suggests movement, that we're moving in government, we're not stuck. It's a nice little aspect that this is sort of our equestrian fence. It's running behind the fence. And then also I used the Arial font that was in the logo previously, because Arial it's a very modern font. It's Adobe's version of a font called Helvetica, which is basically the font that you used in the 90s to prove to people, 90s and 2000s, that it wasn't your father's company. We're ecologically mindful. We understand the new economy. So the nice thing, though, is that it juxtaposes with the serifed font of Trajan. So it gives us, it's a very unassuming font. So we have the big, authoritative Milton, Georgia, and then down below, hey, have you heard? We're home of the best quality of life in Georgia. We don't like to make a big deal of it, but they gave it to us. So that's basically where we are at this point. And we're just, like Chris said, we're just trying to see if this is kind of going where you guys would like to see something like this go. So I can answer any questions you have.
What's your, with the latest logos, what's your thoughts and staff's thoughts on those? They getting closer?
Everyone really seemed to like the, here, hold on, let me just go to the presentation again. Everyone's favorite seemed to be this last one with the horse silhouette, with it popping out at the top. Sorry.
Maybe the way to frame it is to say, if we were to throw that image at you, that's kind of when we've all put our heads together after multiple iterations. That was our winner. So that's the one I'm kind of looking to see the council react to, because then I can get some sense of whether or not we're even close. Yeah. Over the course of probably 2 months, and just Jason designing and us commenting, and Jason designing and us commenting, that's the result of what came out of it. Do you think that's close? Do you think that's nowhere near? Is there things you like about it, things you don't like about it?
Well, I'll start. I mean, I do like, and I think you went through a methodical process and it makes a lot of sense. And I guess I'm trying to think of all the different areas that our logo or branding is. And the only thing I wonder about that, although it may fit in just perfect, does it, with what we've got now, if you go in a small area or a big area, think about it on a page or something like that. Does that fit with the more of a rectangle, or when you shrink it down too small, is it hard to read?
I think it'll work. I think it'll work either way. One of the reasons why I use that trade is a very readable font. Now, clearly, this would be a little tough to read, so we could drop that if it needed to go smaller for letterhead and things like that. But this, and this would be really easy to reproduce on shirts, or business cards, or letterhead, all sorts of different projects that you would use it on. Now, as far as police and fire, we might just stick with the city seal on those. Because I know with the police cars, students design those, so we're not going to mess with those, obviously. But in the city seals on the trucks, I think it looks really good. And I think that the city seal works with this. I think that having the city seal on things that this does not work on, I think it all works together. City seals are, you'll notice I use the city seal a lot more because I like it a lot better, and I think it says a lot more about the city than the horse logo that we currently have. And I really like that we've been using it on our trucks and stuff. So I do think that we would be covered in virtually any situation that we're going to put a city logo on.
So, anybody else have any comments or direction?
And of course, if we needed just this horse, just like we use the little horse right now just to go on the side of things, this could work just as easily. Because all this is there's this white back here to block in. It's like that's it.
Got 4 legs.
What's there?
4 legs.
Yeah.
And like you talked, Jason, you and I chatted about it, a few weeks ago. Sometimes if you use this, you don't have to put everything on there. Like you
Absolutely.
might, if it fits better without having the home of blah blah blah, that can go away and different applications where they fit better.
Absolutely.
I'm kind of leaning more towards the 3 horses on the top, actually.
Yeah.
And from my standpoint, I like the fact that there are different colors as well, representing the different aspects of what Milton is, not just one color or one horse. So, we're a community. We're not just a citywide area. Plus, I don't like the fact you chop the legs off the other horse.
It's okay. Yeah, that was Sam Traeger had seen a logo that he liked before that utilized an aspect of that.
I don't know if I like the horse itself, but I like having multiple.
Okay.
And the shades. I like that.
I mean, basically the horse is just, I went and found a picture of a horse, and then I turn it into a cartoon. I outline it and make it a silhouette so that it's easy to reproduce and that it's instantly recognizable.
So that horse doesn't belong to some other
Not
person
anymore.
that's not trademarked? Or
Nope.
copyrighted?
Once we modify it 20%, we're good. So it does not. It would belong to us now.
One thing you mentioned was the horse giving the impression of motion. And I think the 3 horses fully exposed like that really gives you a greater sense of motion than the one on the lower right, the single horse.
That works as well because it's still, that's still only a 3-color logo, which is cheap and easy to reproduce.
I like having established in 2006 in there somewhere.
Okay.
I would love to see I don't know how you could do it, but have it somehow portray the 4-board or 3-board fence with those things with the 2006 somehow or another. And I just think that's really kind of a symbol of Milton, so I would like to see that. I agree, still agree, I don't care for it.
Okay.
me it's filler. I don't like it. Yeah. It makes it look like you're trying to be something and don't know what you are, so you put filigree around it.
Putting perfume on a pig.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Okay.
Okay, so our takeaway here, if we were to work with this a little bit more to come up with multiple horses, multiple colors, incorporate the reference to the fence and establish 2006 in something, and add that to the list, and we'll go back to the drawing board and crunch another couple things out, see where we go.
Yeah.
Is that what I'm
Yeah,
hearing?
I think that's, everybody okay with that? Lance? Okay.
And is everybody okay with the Trajan font? You like that font?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that was good.
Okay.
Thank you, Jason,
Okay,
for
we'll
all
try
the
that and see
hard-
where we go.
But thank you for all the hard work, and I'll tell you what, it's exciting to, and I don't point this just at Jason, but all of our staff, just to have the mindset to go out and try to do something that saves the city and the taxpayers money. That's very commendable. So I think everybody working here's got that attitude, so we appreciate that.
Good use of resources.
All right.
Okay, now we can go with the lights back on, I guess. We're going to budget.
We'll move on to discussion of the City of Milton budget with Ms. Stacy Inglis.
Sure, I'll go ahead and start. First, I'll go ahead and let you know that the documents that I handed out to you earlier have been revised, mostly because the actuals have been updated, so you can get a better sense of where we are. And then there were a few changes that have been made based on some things that council members have pointed out, and just things that we've kind of noticed as we've gone through yet again. So the first change, and it's a very minor change, it didn't change the bottom line, was in Public Works, we pulled $1,800 out of the emergency services allowance and put it into a rental equipment and vehicles account, and this is specifically to rent a light tower out at Birmingham Park if there's ever any emergencies that happen at night that we have to light that park for. And in Public Works, there was also another change that happened, and this kind of came to light in some of Councilmember Thurman's questions. The electricity line item, when we went back and looked at that, we noticed that it could actually decrease quite a bit based on some updated information that we received. And that line item decreased by $62,300. So it went from $387,300 down to $325,000. In the fire department and in the police department, we started looking at the holiday pay. We realized, I guess, as I went through and kind of analyzed it, mostly the fire department, I kept seeing that there was more of a roller coaster, ups and downs as each fiscal year went by, and it was because of the city manager holiday and where that fell within the calendar year, and how it fell within our fiscal year. In 2012, I know.
There's one that I get to pick every year.
Oh.
Apparently like one fiscal year I would have picked it, and then for the next calendar year I would have picked it, and they ended up in different calendar years but same fiscal years. So you end up with a different number of holidays in the budget document versus what the way the reality is on the calendar.
Can we do a mayor and council holiday too? We can pick one.
Yeah, if y'all wanna have that one, you're welcome to it.
So in fiscal year 12, there were 11 holidays, actually. We would get 12 holidays in a calendar year, but 11 holidays fell in fiscal year 12, but 13 will fall in fiscal year 13. So I've increased both fire and police holiday pays to account for the 13 holidays. Fire increased by almost $6,500, and police increased by $14,000 to account for those holidays and to account for the 5% market adjustment to the pay. IT, I had to increase one line item in there, and it's for the maintenance fee for online payments, and it's increased by $1,500. We had one free year for that feature, the online tax payments, and now that year is up, and so we're just now receiving paid bills for those, and it's $125 a month. So all of the changes cause an overall deduction in general fund expenditures and has resulted in a decrease in the amount of fund balance needed to cover the capital projects in fiscal year 13. So the overall decrease to fund balance was $40,713. So the bottom line that we need to take out of fund balance is $1,800,268. And those are the changes to the budget. So now I think we kind of talked about what
Yeah,
is it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to lead the discussion tonight by just asking the question. Because I know that Stacy and I have met individually with most of you all, if not, I guess everybody but Matt. So we've been through the document in fairly good detail. I'd almost like to start the discussion by saying, is there anything that is in this budget that you all want funded that is not funded at this point? And we'll start there and see if maybe we can make sense of that. And then I'll let you decide how you want to do a discussion on through the rest of it. But that's kind of what I'd be looking for at this point, is stuff that we probably should start to talk about whether or not we need to get into it.
And the question that we do have code red in there, right?
That's right.
I didn't find it in there, but I assume we did.
It is, and I'll find it for you. But yes, it's in here. I believe it's in.
Yeah, there's the fire department, it's
Fire
covered
department.
maintenance.
Code red maintenance.
Yeah, I would recommend that, as Chris said, most of you guys have had fairly lengthy meetings and gone over a lot of things, and a lot of comments, and a lot of things have been addressed. And maybe we'll just go around first and see, is there anything that you'd like to add or subtract, or any concerns, or if you're satisfied based on your meetings and discussions with Chris and Stacy, and see how far we need to get into any details.
Sure.
So
I know you had brought up, and maybe we attack it right off the bat. I know you had brought up and asked the council to consider the hazardous waste recycling thing.
$12,000.
I've received fairly positive feedback from the other individual council members as I've talked to them about that. So it's not in today, but I'm getting the feel that that's something that you all probably want to go ahead and do.
I'd like to see it in there.
Okay.
Yes.
You guys okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now I'll back out of it unless you all ask me to be in it.
All right, well, start kind of at either end. I don't know if Lance or Karen wants to start first with any comments, or
Let Lance start this time.
he wants you to start.
Yeah.
You got any more questions that weren't?
I don't think
Answer
so. I've
or-
met with Chris
Yeah.
and Stacy, and I think pretty much, and more of my questions were kind of philosophical, such as the loss major there. But, it was kind of philosophical how we got to certain things. And, but at this point, I really don't have anything.
Okay. Mark, you got good. I wanted to bring up something that we haven't really discussed, but maybe something that I don't know that we've got room now, but we might want to, especially as we amend our budget mid-year, depending on our loss negotiations. A lot of us are probably hearing needs for sidewalks near the new school, and that might be something that we want to look at and get some, keep in mind to see if we can start addressing that.
Okay, that's all right. Yeah, I had an idea that that was going to be coming. So we've got here, and I can pass these around and we can send you out copies. I think we probably should do that as well. We've put on paper exactly where the missing segments are, and then assigned a cost value to those segments, so you have some idea as to what we're talking about here. Carter probably can speak more about that, but so I'll let him.
What we wanted to do is look at those sections of sidewalk where we didn't have sidewalk on either side of the road, where those gaps were within a half mile of the schools, the existing school as well as Cambridge High School. We did talk to Fulton County schools about how they run their bus routes and how close to the schools they get, and really they'll go almost as close to the school as they feel like they need to. Within a mile and a half of the school, they start considering them to be courtesy stops, and we'll look at existing conditions out there and how many students are going to make a determination as to whether or not they're going to stop there. And so we tried to limit our scope to within a half mile of those schools. We've got 2 sections on here that we're going to be bringing forward next week. One on Webb Road between Windward and Highway 9, and another section on Cogburn just past Webb as you go out towards Rhodes Plantation and the city limit line that fall within the our MARTA grant. And so we're bringing both those forward. I don't know that we can afford both of those with what's remaining in the grant, but we're going to be asking to at least move those forward to bid so we can see where we are with those. The rest of these sections are all just based on where we felt there was a need within these school zones. And it'll at least give us a sidewalk on one side of the road.
Okay. Well, now, I would think that, not speaking for everybody, but everybody would be interested in looking at that and you know, again, maybe considering that when we amend the budget.
You know, I had actually asked if there was any way, I know that we require developers to put in sidewalks if they develop the property, but any way to recoup it. And you said not under the current ordinance. Is that something that we can change to have it so that if we do put in sidewalks and it's at some later time it is developed, that we can get some kind of credit back for that, or is that something that?
Good question. I don't know that I have an answer for that right now. I think it becomes difficult, and is there any type of statute of limitations, type of development that comes in?
But it just seems like, you know, if we're putting sidewalks in a place that, if it was going to be developed, the developer would be required to put those in, and we're saving them that money when they do the development, if there is a way that we can, like I said, recoup any of the stuff that we've done in advance. So I don't know if by law we can do that or not, but I just thought it was worth looking at to see if there's a way to do it.
Well, I mean, impact fees would be a vehicle for doing things like that.
That's right. Just to give you an idea of the segments we looked at about 7 segments that are missing, and they range anywhere from 133,000 to 293,000.
What's the total to do them all?
Let's see, that's going to be 3, 4.5, 5, 6, 9, 1.3 maybe.
That helps when my fingers work.
You have to make the car deal.
Yeah. Can I get you to sign here that you'll buy tonight?
Yeah, this baby home.
All right, so 437,000. $878. So $1.3 million.
How much is left in the market?
About 173,000.
And that's a lot. It may be something we may have to spread over 3 years or something like that, but, you know, maybe something we want to prioritize.
And what we did try to do is go back to the trail master plan. So all of this is not just 5-foot sidewalk. In some places, it's 10 foot to try and match the master plan.
How about the area coming down from Crooked Creek?
We have
Bethany Bend. I was walking along there the other day, and I was walking back towards the house. Karen Lee was coming to pick me up. I thought I'd save her gas, so after RISPA, but you know, there was no sidewalk.
We've got a section on this plan on the west side of the road from Crooked Creek all the way down to Bethany Bend.
Okay.
You would have had to cross the street, though.
Huh?
You would have had to cross the street.
Yeah, well, you and the chicken.
Okay. Well, that, you know, we look forward to looking at that, and again, everybody keep that in mind, that it's probably something to staff that, you know, we're going to look at pretty soon.
So even if we take that $1.3 million out over 3 years,
3 years.
I mean, you look at 400,000, you know, 450,000 a year over 3.
And 170 plus thousand is MARTA.
Yeah.
Okay. So 400,000 over 3.
And just another question, too. Is there a way to establish sidewalk use prior before putting one in there? And not saying that we don't need it near the schools, but I've had some citizens ask me about them near where I am.
Yeah.
You look at the paths.
Sorry?
Yeah, see
Look at the paths.
the cow paths.
Well, if that's the way,
That's
then we need to...
the best way to do sidewalks. Let open the facility and
But
wait
without 'em.
about a year or 6 months, see
Right.
where the paths are, and then put the sidewalks in.
One thing that's not on here, and I can include it, I don't have it readily, there are some gaps around the Deerfield Park area too that we've looked at in the past. Some of them are relatively simple, some aren't. Is that something that you would like to see too, or just around the schools?
You know, what I would say is that I think the schools are a priority, are very important, you know, because of obviously safety of kids going back to school. But it would be nice to kind of take a look at everything and prioritize, you know, for a little bit of bucks, we can connect this area, a little more, we can do this and that to, you know, start biting off some chunks.
In your package for the MARTA discussion next week, there are those sections that we looked at for the MARTA grant. And so that identifies those sections within a half mile of the MARTA bus routes in the Deerfield Park area that we looked at in the past too. So we can include that map.
Everything we do is a minimum 5 feet wide, right?
That's correct.
My wife, I guess there was a section on our street from one end to the other that wasn't connected. My wife was hoping we were getting sidewalks when she saw the new water lines going in. I told him I'd ask Fulton County.
We still on this?
Yeah, go ahead.
I had a mulligan that I wanted on my comments. I have one thing I did want to mention.
Okay.
Here. I think we talked about it with parks in this section of the city, trying to get something done in terms of funding, whether we do something with the little 1 acre site as a pocket park.
What I've done at this point is I've asked our Parks Director to take that to the Parks and Rec Advisory Board to make a recommendation.
Right.
Because there's an assortment of things, and you all may not agree with the recommendation, but it's
Right.
better to start from a recommendation than to say, what do you want to do? And we might look at just getting, we might just look at getting a park bench out there, or there might be a recommendation to do some type of a more formalized exercise type park or something. But we're going to let the Parks and Rec Advisory Board take a stab at that.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, moving on, going down the line about the budget.
Let me follow up with that. Let me get my mulligan in just real quick too. The way that would be funded then too is if you remember in the capital budget where we have a $905,000 appropriation into trail or park enhancement, and we're suggesting or requesting that you would add an additional $500,000 to that in this fiscal year, bringing that to $1,405,000. So if there were construction dollars attributable to that acre that prioritized that it was the next park enhancement, that's the line it would fund from.
Okay.
Bill?
Well, you took my first one, and Lance took my second.
You get a mulligan, you get one more.
I'm concerned, I think, too, with designated crosswalks up on Highway 9 and Deerfield area too. And once we open up the new road, going back to the public safety building, concern about traffic control there, either intermittent traffic light and fire trucks are mobilized, or even getting kids across that intersection. I'm sure they're going to be using the road for walkability also. So, with the subdivisions across the road, I'm sure there's going to be some cross-highway pedestrian traffic up in that area. So.
That's true.
Is the state going to allow that? How would
Well, you'd be looking at a mid-block crossing, I think, which is probably a little bit difficult to do, although not unheard of, and probably depends a lot on the volume of pedestrian traffic that we have in there. We are looking at some additional, not necessarily traffic signals, but at least warning devices for the fire department and the police when they exit that facility. And then we're going to look at an overall traffic signal both from a warrant standpoint when we begin to see how much traffic uses that particular entrance, as well as how it fits into the overall Bethany Bend Highway 9 intersection improvements if that study gets funded later this year. I guess I say all that to come back with, I think we're just going to need to evaluate it once it opens and we see what kind of traffic we have at that particular entrance.
One other thing as relates to parks too, I believe we have some seed money in there for design for our expansion area at Bell Memorial.
Yes.
Is that going to be adequate, do you think, or is we need to
I'd always love more.
put some more in that fund?
You know, it's always great to throw more in there than you need. It's what the budget holds at this point. I mean, that's the kind of the answer there is what the budget holds. I could, you know, if we start tinkering with,
I want to make sure once we start that process.
that's kind of where I'm, no, that's not that. That's the reinvestment funds from, that's the money we get in from the HYA. Yeah, let me look at that, Bill.
Make sure once we get that process started that it's adequately funded. And are we going out for RFQs, RFPs?
For
Master?
yeah, once we own it, we don't own it yet, but once we own it, yeah, that would be the way that process will happen.
Right.
I think we close on it on October the 4th. That gives you an idea of when we're going to close.
And I think for the first step in the conceptual planning, it'll probably be an RFQ.
Okay.
We're just going to have to use some of that 40,000 to reappropriate against that. That's what I'm thinking. I really more envision that to be construction as opposed to planning. Okay. Oh, sorry. I was kind of thinking out loud. Work session stuff.
I'm actually going to see Bill Lusky's an iPad.
You are, but I gave you the assignment to convince him that it was a good idea. So he'll use it if you're good on your sales pitch and your training.
Don't tell anybody it's a dummy one and it doesn't have anything on it.
Well, is that the iPad budget? Is that, I guess that's just for council, or is that for staff as well?
It's well, no, it's not for the entire staff. It'll make sure that those of us that are participating in every council meeting have the same capability as the council, but it won't be. It's not a iPad frenzy here amongst the staff. No.
Right. Okay. And we're pretty sure that these revenues coming in is going to be what we're going to receive.
I'm comfortable in saying that absent conditions in the world changing like 2008 that we have little ability to control for, these revenues are conservatively estimated.
Typically look at them conservative, and in the past we go back 6 months from now, a year from now, and usually going with them to adjust.
Right.
Before we go to the city.
And I saw in here, and I can't find it in there right now, but we have something where as far as investments as well for the city. We weren't anticipating much of a return on the investments. I was just curious what that process was. Is it just in CDs, or is that in?
Oh, that's because interest rates aren't low.
I know interest rates are
There's a
low.
limited amount that we can actually invest in according to our policies.
Yeah, how does that work? Explain that to me. Limited amount, is it just in CDs, or is it in municipal bonds, or?
I have to look back at the policies. CDs is obviously one of the things that we can do it. But money markets were actually earned a higher interest rate than CDs.
Right.
At the time that I last did the survey.
Sure.
And we can do, I think we can do T-bills. Again, those are such low rates, and you have to go out for so long to get those. I think, again, the last time I looked at it was just money market accounts, and I did call around to several different banks to get some pretty good money market rates, and we kind of have it spread out.
Okay.
But there's a certain amount that they would allow us to put in there to earn those rates and then anything over that, they would have to collateralize, and that would decrease the interest that we would earn on it. That's the bad thing about.
So low interest rates.
Mhm.
The, how
I mean,
far
they're
out?
like point something percent.
Yeah, it's bad. It was a negative return with inflation. When you think about it, 2.5% inflation rate, we're losing money on that, which is the next question is how far out in the yield curve are we allowed to go? Do you understand that? 30-year bonds versus 10-year bonds versus 3-month treasury bills.
I'd have to look at the policies and see what it says.
Just curious, because there are some, interest rates out there, and of course, credit ratings with junk bonds and things like that. I'm not saying we do that, but just so we know what we can be in.
Yeah, it's without knowing, I guess, with a better capital improvement plan, we do have a plan on how we are going to spend the money. We have to just figure out what the cash flows are going to be and when they're going to come in and where they're going to go out and all that stuff, and then we can get a better investment. With the new banking services agreement that we have, we do have treasury management as part of that as part of that agreement, and I will be spending some time with them to discuss how we're going to invest our monies.
Okay.
What do you think about penny stocks?
The pink sheets?
Interesting chat after the meeting. All right, you good?
Yeah, I'm good.
All right, Karen?
Right now, the city manager approved budget shows a deficit of like 1.8. What do we expect our contribution to the fund balance to be for the current fiscal year?
I expect that the fund balance is going to be about $8.5 million at the end of this fiscal year. So after we take out the 1.8, I think we figured it was going to be around 6.7 million for the end of fiscal year 13.
And I talked to you, Chris, about the fact that our capital project budget items, the stuff in there being stuff that realistically will be used within a 2-year pot. And I think I used the word stockpiling money, and you said no, we'll use the word hoarding money in the accounts.
Right?
Have y'all looked at that to make sure that the money that is being put, and clearly the reserves for certain things need to be set aside, but to make sure that, the things that are in there are ones that we will be actually using over the next couple years, rather than stuff that we need to allocate that we can use now and then put it in the budget a couple years from now?
I don't see any of those. I'm not wanting to kick the can down there especially, I'm seeing real needs that attach to real funding.
Okay, have we got any idea, on the Hopewell House is a very large item on there.
It's in capital grant.
Yeah.
For those that are playing along.
And a lot of that, it's in capital grant, but a lot of that money will be Milton money. Have we looked to see whether or not, $529,000 of our own funds is a lot for that facility. I know a lot of it's in the improvements, and have we looked to see what we can do that maybe less than that $529,000? To me, that's just a lot of money for that particular.
And I addressed that a little bit. I think all of us that have construction experience feel like, as Chris has said, that's a pretty stout budget there.
I think we got to find a way to do it for less than $529,000.
I think we're all on that same page. I guess the question is now, on the budget, do we change those funds, change that number and put less in there, or do we leave that number and then do our best due diligence once we come to fruition to spend less than that and have an amendment later? So,
personally, I would prefer to have less in there, because I think a lot of times the more you have in there, the more it ends up creeping up to being whatever you have in there. And I'd rather, take some out of this and put it to sidewalks that we can do this year and get done, that really will impact people's lives a good bit. And I would not, but I think we need to get this house so it's used on a regular basis, and we need to spend the money to do it. But we don't need the Ferrari version of it. We may just need a good old Ford or GM or Honda version of it.
In my limited knowledge, what kind of cost do you think we could do it for based on construction? I don't know.
that's open.
One of the things
It showed $75,000 for the kitchen. I'm thinking that.
You have to define what you want, right? And one of the things that we did here was the reason that the number is as big as it is, I guess, to some degree, is that there's probably a smaller figure you could stick here and get the building open to the public, right? The thing that we are looking for, though, was the possibility of using available CDBG grant funds, as well as tapping into the program resources of Senior Services North Fulton. Now, in order to do both of those things, you build a different building than if you're just opening the building to the public. So, sure, do I think that a lesser number could be there and the building be open to the public? Yes. Am I cautious to say we don't want to decrease this number too terribly much because we have to build it to a standard that will allow Senior Services North Fulton to use it? Now, let's put the realities of the revenues here. Let's just say even if we are up at $529,000 of city funds, the offset to that is in the first 3 years is $170,000 of CDBG funds, and almost $340,000, I think it was, $1,000 in appropriated monies to programming the facility. I mean, it will be open and vibrant and providing service with this level of bringing it on board. So, there's several $100,000 that we potentially would walk from if we don't open it with a kitchen that can do the senior meals. If we don't open it with a ramp that can get the seniors to the certain part of the building and make it ADA accessible and compliant. So there's a cheaper way to open it, but we might be walking away from some other revenues to do it that way. That's my only concern.
But is there a way to open it and still get all those other revenues and use it, but not have to have it cost $529,000?
I hope so, but I don't think that number is.
Because that's a pretty thing when you look at all our needs. That's a pretty big number for.
It is, and unfortunately at this point we asked Precision, the experts, to do a cost opinion for us, and we're budgeting against that cost opinion. So we're budgeting against the better than back of the napkin research we did, but admittedly it's not perfect. No, it probably is very conservative because anytime you give an opinion, you don't want to be wrong, right? So,
and I'm just hearing from a lot of people out in the community that they have a hard time understanding why we would spend that kind of money on that facility, and even with me explaining to them that yes, because it enables us to get a lot more. They're saying, how in the world can you spend, with between the 529 and the money we'd be getting, $700,000 on however many, 2,500 square feet of building.
This is kind of one of those things where I'll let you all tell me what you're willing to spend. We're budgeted against the study we did. If you want to take some of these dollar figures out of here and have us go do something that's more actually construction ready so that our costs are kind of focused in as opposed to being general opinions. You want to tell me, have Bill's estimator look at it? I don't.
Well, we have, and I think it's conservative, but it's realistic too. In order to receive that funding from Fulton County, you have to have a commercial kitchen, and I think there's probably ways to lessen the budget in there for the commercial kitchen. Use a lot of used equipment. That's always on the market. I think maybe confirm it or corroborate the fact that there's probably some earthwork costs in there that can be deferred to the intersection improvements.
So Bert's got a piece of equipment. You can go over there.
So I think there's ways to go ahead and comment on that.
Well, we are going to try and look at including some of the entrance improvements with the intersection improvement, but keep in mind this is site work included in addition to the building work, and I would just caution you that while the allocations may not be exact, I think the overall number is probably pretty close. And anytime that you move not only from a residential structure to a commercial structure, there's a lot involved with that. And now we're talking about a historical residential structure to a commercial structure. And so the site work to bring it up to code for that, I wouldn't want to underestimate the work that's going to be involved to make that happen.
And are we sure that we will get all the money, not only for the grant money, but then the money to actually operate it if we spend this much on it this year?
No, we're not. But I don't know that we would necessarily move forward with funding this unless we get a favorable result to that, right?
And I've seen parts of Fulton County's budget, and it's not.
I have too, and it's it's bake sales, car washes, and coins in the fountains.
But the one thing is we don't have, even if we allocate the budget, we don't have to
That's right.
move forward if that's, if you found that. I'd be willing to say, and, to some other points, $75,000 for a kitchen is not out of range for a commercial kitchen. Even if you use used equipment, there's, hoods and lots of plumbing and electrical and that kind of stuff. So, if it helps the council a little bit, I'd be, willing to certainly deduct or take out, say, $50,000 of that would kind of force us to work a little harder to, if it does come to fruition, a tighter budget to work to, if the council want to do something like that. But I think if we go any further down than that, we may have to really start rethinking it, at least relooking at it.
Well, we have an asset there right now, and in order to make it productive, you're going to have to do certain things, improve the access to it, which involves earthwork, the accessibility to the facility itself to meet ADA requirements. You're going to have to have widen doorways and put in handicap toilet facilities, features like that. So no matter what we do, you're going to have to make it accessible for the public. It's going to be open to the public. It's a public facility. So there's just some things you just can't pull out of that budget. And I'd rather see it stay where it is. I understand what you're saying. If there's a budget there, we're going to spend it all. But I think we're good stewards of what we do here, and I think we can find ways to save funds on it, make it efficient, so it's open to the entire community. And so going further, Mansell House opens it up for private uses, and it's a revenue source for them. And they pull in between $20,000 and $25,000 a year rental fees for weddings and receptions, stuff like that.
Doesn't that or gross?
Yes.
Well, I think we need to open the place up and open it up with a purpose, not just open it up and hang a sign on it for rent. We kind of have one of those. So I'd like to see us, either trim it just a little bit or keep it where it's at.
Well, it has to be, otherwise it's not an asset. I mean, my concern is, I'm hearing from people in the community that they're concerned about the cost, were the same as what Karen has mentioned. And obviously, being a decision from a prior council, if we don't go with it and make it all it can be, then the only other option really is to sell it. And I don't see that happening from this council in that decision-making process. So we've got to find a way to make it work, but we got to make sure that we're going to get the use out of it that we would intend. And looking at the competition of other senior areas or how we're going to do it, and I just need to feel comfortable with that. I'm not sure I do right now. But that's just looking at the foresight how we're going to do it. If we're going to do it, we got to do it right.
And the numbers indicate, North Fulton Senior Services runs their numbers for service, and they don't want to open up a facility and use their money if they don't find that there's a reason to have the service. This, to give you some ideas, the same group that offers some of the services out of the basement of the Crabapple Government Center, the building that's actually in Milton, but Alfred owns it. That some of the services that are even delivered there would be transitioned to be delivered at this new location. So there is a market demand for their services, and the market study gave them a lot of comfort that there was, when they did the proximity of seniors in the rings around its location. It's like kind of when you build a school. Their demand modeling suggested that was a decent location, and that there would be a demand for the service.
Will we know with Fulton County whether or not they have the money to actually open it and use it all for this upcoming fiscal year, or will some of it actually be?
The county runs a calendar fiscal year.
Right.
So, within the first quarter of
529 all of this year, or some of it can go this year and some of it can go in the next fiscal year?
It's a timing issue, and the reason it's a timing issue is because these funds, if they exist, We got to jump on it.
Right.
You know, we know that the CDBG funds will exist.
Right.
You know, we'll go through the right process to do the public hearings. We're actually, this represents 3 years of CDBG funds. So this 170 is not an annual appropriation. That's a 3 years. So that's a 12, 13, 14 appropriation. So one prior year, the current year, one future year. I'm fearful that if we're prepared to push go in early spring, that if we don't have the full funding available to move forward, that we run the risk of losing the programming dollars. Now, you could probably get a better sense in your discussions with Commissioner Hausman whether or not that's a real number. And I'd be interested to know that. You know,
But I'm just wondering whether or not we ought to have some of it in current year and plan on the rest of it being in the next fiscal year, knowing that it really wouldn't all probably be spent in this fiscal year budget. Some of it would actually be in that next fiscal year budget, and if it would free up stuff for the sidewalks that we know we need to get done pretty quickly.
Well, if that's what you all want to do, that's fine.
But does that hurt us with getting the funding?
It could.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could.
I mean, we could always.
If we're not liquid when we need to be liquid, it could run the risk of us not being able to secure the grant funding.
6 months out, we could amend the budget. If we see that it's not going to happen, we could certainly transfer it then.
I think we'll know what's going to happen in the first quarter.
No, that's what I'm saying. If nothing happens, we decided we could certainly transfer the money over then if we needed to.
I would just like to see some sidewalks get done as soon as possible, so. Because I think that's something that we have a real need and can do pretty quickly and could make a difference in people's lives.
Well, do we want to have, I mean, that's the purpose of a work session like this. Do we want to have the discussion of saying the sidewalks are a priority? And, you know, I can get comfortable as a council and saying, okay, if we're going to build our fund balance up to 8.5, do y'all want to look at another $250,000 out of, I mean, I could get behind that with a level of comfort and say that if it's that important, that one-time capital expense of getting sidewalks to this new school is important enough, let's take $250,000 and put it towards sidewalks. And not have to necessarily remove from this line unless you want to, but to say, you know, guys, we're the council, that's important to us, we need some sidewalks, Chris, fund some sidewalks, and we'll do it.
I could support that.
Yeah, I mean, I just,
Sounds like you just did that.
yeah. I mean, stuff that we know
Check.
we can get done in this current fiscal year that can impact people, I'd like to see done.
Okay.
Okay.
So we'll add $250,000 to sidewalks.
Okay.
All right. And the other thing too is like take an egg breakfast, the chicken's involved, but the pig is committed. You kind of have to be committed to this thing.
I don't believe I've ever heard that.
Some land outside. Yeah, I know.
Okay.
I'm just saying, we're going to do it. We got to do it right. With this house. And I mean, there's no way it would be a mess if we just don't do it right.
I feel a whole lot more comfortable leaving the house alone because I don't want to have that opportunity where I say, guys, we had the potential to bring in $340,000, but we were $40,000 short. But I could, if to keep that there, at least through the first quarter, to identify funding if it becomes available, and
Then if it looks like it's not going to go,
Right.
Or if it looks like it's pushed out a year,
then we
just
could
spend that.
take that money and buy some more sidewalks.
right.
Okay.
But if you want to seed fund some sidewalks, we guarantee we get some extra sidewalks done this year around the school. We can do
I
that.
think
I would like to do
certainly do that. I think you got full support on that.
Okay.
Because by January 1st, we'll know a lot of things. We'll know what Fulton County's budget is. We'll know what our loss negotiations have. So we'll have a lot of
There's a lot
unknowns known.
Right. There's a lot of unknowns known. That's said very well because there's a lot of big unknowns known.
Exactly.
That a conservative budget group like I think we are recognizes that there are unknowns and we don't count on it.
Right.
If we wanted to be out there and a little bit crazy, we'd start funding a whole bunch of stuff because we just were forecasting the outcome to be positive, and that's what gets places in trouble.
Okay. All right. You got your
I can do
march
that.
forward, and if there's
Yes, sir.
any, tweaking or whatever, still have opportunity. I will say that I will be absent next Monday's meeting. So, Chris and I talked about maybe have a special call meeting the week after so I could attend, but and I told him I feel comfortable with, I'll give any my input to Chris or staff before the meeting and trust you guys to make the right decision. I think we're all pretty close on the same page. So. All right.
Good enough. And the last item is mine. Without further ado, this is a request that came in, and it came in one of these notebooks. I guess for the purposes of the record,
Let me see if we've got any public comment on that now.
I checked with those that I recognized as non-staff members in the audience, and nobody indicated they wanted to comment, because I was going to play clerk and get comment cards. You can ask again if you want.
I've just opened it up if there's any public comments. Okay. Go ahead, Chris.
This one is consideration of a request from Lester Lee to grant sewer rights to his property on the northeast corner of Cogburn Road and its intersection with Bethany Bend. I'll refer you to the picture. That represents 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, what amounts to 7 individual parcels. So that's not one big parcel. Parcel lines just aren't drawn on that map. It is the request of Mr. Lee as follows. I'm just going to read you the letter, and then it's kind of open. Well, I'll read you the letter, and then I'll kind of frame where we are in the process, and then let you tell me what your thoughts are. Dear Mr. Lagerblum, as we discussed, I'm writing to request your assistance in granting sewer rights to our property in Milton. As you know, my partner Sam Baird and I own the 9-acre parcel of land on the corner of Cogburn and Bethany. As you also know, this property was originally part of the master residential development, which in part has morphed into the new Milton High School, a development that was granted sewer rights without extending them to our property. Sam and I, along with a respected developer, have drawn up plans for 50% of the site to build 20 townhomes, a product desperately needed in Milton, and later to add a senior care development, another product the town needs now and even more so in the future. Both of these projects are unfeasible unless the land is granted access to sewer. Once again, we're asking for access to the sewer system that the school was granted and arguably should have been granted to us at the time. This development is not only needed product in our town, but also will provide a new source of revenue for Milton, as well as create jobs and spur economic growth in the surrounding small businesses. On behalf of both Sam and I, we sincerely appreciate your assistance. I'll end with adding that our development partner has other site options, namely one in Alpharetta, and is eager to begin building. I would kindly request you urgently consider our request. That was the letter that came in. As you know, we are truly, and I mean truly, in the final phase of solidifying a map that is going to be in front of the Fulton County Commission, as well as then come to the city of Milton, so that we can finally once and for all get this IGA done between the county and the city. The county has consistently taken the position that if we were to suggest that they add parcels to the map to grant sewer access to, that they wouldn't object or get in the way. That is why this request is here tonight, is because that map is not final. The request came in officially here. I just am interested kind of in your thoughts as to, in this last hour before this IGA is presented to you for your consideration, would you want that parcel to be considered? Obviously, the landowner has requested it. That's really what's at hand tonight. It's no more, no less than that. It's whether or not you would like that parcel, or 7 parcels, I guess. That area is probably a better way to share it. Whether you would like that shaded as though there is sewer access. To give you some proximity, this is Highway 9 in Bethany, so this is the public development of the school. There it is.
I guess this is the property that at one point the church,
I believe so.
trying to go in there that elected not to. Have you talked to Ken at all about, is there any, I listened to you read the letter, it said something about this property was not granted, but this is part of a master, I mean, is there any
It
legal?
wasn't granted because it wasn't adjacent to
Is there,
Highway 9.
No, it's not adjacent to Highway 9, which has been our position. Uniquely, we have now a fairly easy ability to get it on the map if you all want to. That's not to say in the future, though, that as requests come in and you all contemplate whether or not you want to extend sewer or serve sewer on a certain property, that's okay, and we can go back and try to get the county to agree to it. Right now, we're just in the finalizing phases of this IGA. So the IGA is about to get presented to you. If this is on it, that's kind of what I'm looking for, is whether or not you want this one on it or not. Once the IGA gets done, it doesn't become impossible to change. it just becomes more difficult because now you have to consent to it, as does the county commission.
I would assume by Fulton County's request that they have sufficient capacity at Big Creek to serve any more areas.
There is capacity, and they do not object. They historically haven't objected. I mean, we could put this one on the map and send it down to the county vote no. I don't think that's what occurs. I mean, I think that they're in the business of providing the utility, and to them, it's more of a revenue game than it is a service area game.
My thoughts are when we had this last sewer discussion that we had defined the area that we were gonna say was serviceable by sewer, and this and a lot of other areas weren't included. So I'm inclined to say let it go.
Okay.
What's the zone right now?
Zoned AG.
So they have to come in for rezoning.
That's right.
All of this as well.
That's correct.
And
And arguably, if they came in for rezoning, you all could grant it at that point. Just recognize that when you do that, it's going to require then that we modify the IGA as well as Fulton County. So there's the risk that you could conceptually do something that you couldn't grant. The other idea would be as they come in to seek a rezoning, it couldn't happen as fast. But no IGA is written in stone. I mean, you don't do that. I mean, IGAs are written to formalize an agreement at a time, and that agreement is always amendable because councils and commissions always change.
when I say let it go, I'm sorry, I mean don't pursue it
Let it come in its natural course if it does.
or not.
Or not. Okay?
Is the high school sewer?
It is.
I would think so. Kings Ridge?
It is.
There's a lot of property off of Highway 9 that is on sewer.
Well, the reason why is because the high school property at one time actually was attached next to where Stone Creek Church is. They had this property here had a little piece that went all the way back to Highway 9, which is the reason why it was granted sewer in the first place. That's why the whole issue came up, is because Shadow managed to find a way to get a little piece attached to Highway 9.
You know, I have several concerns. One, the whole sewer thing, you know, adding sewer or whatnot. Although, you know, after seeing the history of this and this property, I also have concerns on the flip side of what can be, you know, done with this property. Obviously, things have changed. You know, there was a church going to go in there, which probably would have, I think all the residents would agree now that even though there was an outpouring against it, and they decided not to come there, I think everybody would wish now that it had. Now I see it hard to be, if it's zoned Ag 1, to be 9 1-acre lots, you know, on that corner right across from the two schools and that proximity to Highway 9. That's why I was asking if you'd had, you know, if Ken would had any legal, much discussion with Ken at all. If you talk to him on it, if, you know, they can come back later and say we're locking them in.
They could always seek a request to rezone. Do they have a viable use with its current zoning? Probably so. You know, there are even some commercial type uses that are allowed in AG that, you know, that this property has value. I could argue, with or without sewer extended to it. So I don't know that Ken would really weigh in other than to say that he believes it has a viable economic use as it's currently zoned.
Okay.
To me, the sewer and the rezoning are two separate issues. And if they were coming in and needing sewer because of how the property was currently zoned, you know, that would be different. For them to try to get sewer so that they could change the zoning to something much more dense, that bothers me. Because to me, they're trying to use the sewer to get something that they currently don't have, and that bothers me. You know, if they were wanting sewer and they wanted to develop it at 9 1-acre lots and just have one of those lots on sewer just because they felt like that was environmentally the right thing to do, that's a whole different thing. They're not wanting sewer to put 9 1-acre lots there. They're wanting sewer so that they can change the whole zoning of the property. And I can't support using the sewer to change the whole zoning of the property. I mean, if it was a church going there and they really wanted to put in sewer there because they felt like it would be environmentally the best thing to do for the property, that's a whole, and still we're keeping the AG1 zoning or whatever, that, with the use permit, that's very different than wanting to just put sewer there to increase their zoning.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, obviously if we have a chance to be able to, from the sewage standpoint, I just don't agree with the argument that sewage creates density. I think that planning creates density. And we've got to make sure that we watch the planning side of it. As soon as they talk about townhomes and things of that nature right there, that red flags are flying up all over the place on that. That's the question. And, with or without sewer, they may still present the townhome idea. And that's still why my red flags are flying up. I just don't see, I'm looking at the comprehensive land use map right here, it's not part of it. From a sewer standpoint, if they wanted to do that and then put, homes in 1 acre lots, just like are right there above it, I wouldn't have a problem with that. It's what they're gonna be planning for, from what they say from the townhomes and the senior. I just don't feel comfortable with that.
Got it?
I think I'd like to see it come back later on. I think probably the highest, best use of that property would require to be tapped in the sewer system. I'm not sure that mix of townhomes and assisted care facilities the highest and best use. I'd rather see it all an assisted care facility. Develop the whole 7 acres or 9 acres. I think it'd be a good transitional use going from the institutional zoning, both high schools there, into the residential transect, I guess you'd call it. I think that'd be a good transition going into it. I'm not sure both townhomes and an assisted care facility is the highest and best use.
Okay. I think, yes, sir.
No, just I've never really given any position on it.
You can if you want, but I don't know that you need to at this
Well,
point.
Well, you're welcome to give it. I'll give
I'm not
mine
putting a
too.
position, but I
Yeah.
think, for one, I agree, I think it ought to be tied to any future action in terms of rezoning and used on the property, instead of just, because right now, if you grant sewer access to the property, does it stipulate how much flow they get in terms of the type of density or anything, or is it just the fact that the sewer is available to the property and, because different uses are going to generate different flows. And so, again, I think maybe the townhouse idea, maybe not. I kind of like the thought of the senior living facility, but I think maybe it ought to be tied to when they want to do some sort of proposal in terms of rezoning, that we look at that in conjunction with a sewer issue at that point.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I see everybody's points, and I kind of agree, mostly probably with Bill, the fact that, the truth is that's probably going to be tough for anybody to develop 9 1-acre home sites. It's just, the market's not going to be there. Nobody's going to want to wait, it probably needs some kind of transition, but I can also buy in, the fact that it probably needs to come, the requests, if they're going to come, with a plan so that you know what you're approving, and what's coming, and, make sure that it fits.
Make sure it's a true transitional use between the things.
So
And they're not,
Yeah, I can, but I think you kind of got
I think
some direction.
I have some direction. Would you let me go just one more second further? And this is just more philosophically, I want to send you all to think over the next while, couple weeks, maybe get back to me on this, or maybe we can have this discussion in more detail when we actually consider an IGA. I'm going to need some direction as to what level of authority you want that IGA to have. Meaning, if you all approve it with a map attached to it, am I to take that map, and you don't have to answer this tonight, but I'm just wondering if, so that we're all clear, am I to take that map and say that that is your vision for extending sewer? Meaning that if this parcel's not on it, that if they were to even come in with a request for rezoning to townhomes, that we as the staff would just say, I'm sorry, sir, that doesn't meet the IGA that we currently have with Fulton County, therefore, that's just not even something that would be permitted on that property. Or conversely, are we trying to adopt a map so that we have sewer provided in the areas that you all want it to be provided today, but that as requests come in, as the staff, we don't rely upon that map as your map, we rely upon it as the current map that is subject to amendment at any point and at any request for new development.
Comprehensive land use plan is,
Right.
where we do approve things that are not in keeping with the comprehensive land use plan, basically by updating the
plan. And that's just the one thing that I don't want to not have something, double negative. I don't want to not bring you something because we're just saying the map, but the map says, when you all might say, well, Chris, that was a perfect example of a type of use that we would have allowed if you would have just brought the IGA to us and seek to amend it. So I don't know what the right answer there is, but that's something that you all, I just ask for some direction if and when you approve an IGA so that I know how strong it is or for what length of time it's valid, et cetera.
Give us some flexibility. It's like, almost like reserving flows, again, because usually availability is based on the ability to provide treatment. And the flow, and a lot of time moratoriums are based on the fact that they've topped out in the sewer treatment facility. So be able to just reserve flows, but not necessarily say where they're going to come from.
I think the other point of it is the issue of whether it's gravity flow into the system. And I think traditionally, Fulton County has ruled against lift stations.
That's that whole prohibition against interbasin transfer.
Well, it's the interbasin transfer, primarily what it's based on. So I think we may want to study that a little bit more before we put the IGA in its final form.
I don't think that whether or not a parcel has or does not have sewer ought to dictate the zoning. I think we ought to look at what the best use for that property is for Milton, and then if it has sewer and we don't think the best use is high-density housing, then we don't put it as high-density housing. If it doesn't have sewer and the best use is an office, then maybe it needs sewers. But I don't think we ought to make the two be constantly married to each other.
Right. And I certainly don't disagree with you, but this is kind of highlights when I get one of these letters,
You need to bring it before us when you get it.
what's the council want me to do with this? So I think I've got what I need.
Okay. All right. Let's see. One thing I wanted to just tell everybody, I think it's Thursday at 11 o'clock, the ERA Realty office up at Birmingham Crossroads is having a ribbon cutting or whatever, so if you guys, anybody can make it by there, that'd be good.
It was fun at the one Saturday.
Oh, yeah.
It was very nice. Very nice facility.
Great. So,
That's the ERA, not the NRA.
exactly.
7:45 tomorrow morning, Milton High School. If anybody wants to stop by for the 9/11.
Yeah.
They're going to do a 7:45. They're going to have a quick little memorial service with the students.
Where's this?
Milton High School, front lawn of Milton High School.
Oh, the front lawn? Okay.
Yeah, they're all setting up for it today.
It's 7:45.
7:45.
So. All right, we're done? Done or no? Okay.
Great. Thank you all.